What is up, YouTube? We are back. It is Wu-Tang Wednesday. This is Protected Deck, episode 2. I am here with none other than Wesley Cole, aka Get Out of My Face Jack of all trades. He's the king of all trades. Move over, Gambit. There's a new card, Slinger from Louisiana in town. AKA, if variety is the spice of life, call this man Chef Boyard GG. He is the reigning, I'm getting up for this, defending heavyweight champion of Give Me Any Deck. I don't care who the hero is. I don't care about the class. I'm still beating that ass. The Raging Cajun. Wes, what is up, my dude?
Hey, how's it going?
What's up,
Appreciate the intro. You're wild.
These are gonna get way more out of control as these episodes keep going. I'm gonna have to bring a sledgehammer in, break my desk. It's gonna
Bring props and everything.
This is episode 2, and it's already I don't even know how I go up from here. Tuck is gonna feel like he got shafted on his intro now, but it's all good.
Hell yeah! I like the energy.
Hell yeah! So for those who don't know, Wes is another one of my teammates on the Blood Rush Fellows out of Colorado Springs. Wes, for those people who don't know, give a quick intro on kind of how you started in Flesh and Blood. How long you've been playing, what set you played, and how you found your way into Flesh and Blood.
Okay. So if you watched the last episode with Tucker on it, familiar with him, I started the game with him. We started in Tails meta when we moved up to Colorado, and we didn't really know anybody. What better way to get to know people than a hobby? And we were both longtime card gamers. We got back into Yu-Gi-Oh! And some Magic over the pandemic. Not really massive fans of those games anymore. Not that they're bad, just more of a competitive, and I didn't really like where the competitive scene was for those. So we found Flesh and Blood. One of the local shops here recommended it to us, so we picked it up, played Blitz. It was Prism versus, I think, Bolton was what we started on. So this was just before Tails released, and yeah, we've been playing ever since. 3 years now, 2 years now. I don't lost track of time.
I'm so jealous, man. I'm so happy that I found the game of Flesh and Blood, but I still feel like a little newborn baby compared to you guys. You guys know all the cards and stuff, and it's oh, you guys. I love when you guys are like, "Oh, this reminds me of the Tails meta," and I'm like, "Oh."
Oh yeah,
me too. Yeah, great. So today's episode, we actually did, for those, no one's gonna know this except probably me and you. We did a whole video on this that got edited, and we never released it because we were like, nah, let's not do that. And the topic was exactly the topic that we're gonna cover today, which I think is amazing. I think me and you are going to have opposite points, and there's going to be a lot of pros and cons that go back. And the topic today is going to be being a generalist in a game like Flesh and Blood. Being a generalist in Flesh and Blood versus being a specialist. The pros and cons of each, and kind of how, I don't know, if you're trying to maybe find a hero to main. I think we're going to go over some points and talk about maybe how to find a main and just dive into that. I know a lot of people when they first start playing Flesh and Blood, it's one of two things. They either fall in love with a hero and they're like, I'm only playing this thing, and there's pros and cons to that. And then there's some people that kind of want to dip and dabble and everything. The reason I wanted to bring Wes on is because Wes is very good at picking up a deck and playing it very well. He's very good. You're very good at showing up to an armory with whatever you feel like playing that day and doing well on it. And I think there's a lot of value there coming from someone who if I was gonna fall into either the generalist or specialist, and there's all this gray area in between, I most definitely would fall more towards the specialist side because I play Katsu. I only play Katsu.
Right, it's the sort of situation where you show up the armory and nobody even asks you what you're playing. They're like, "Oh, he's playing Katsu. We already know."
Exactly.
Or maybe they'll ask you as a joke, like, "Oh, are you playing something else today?"
Or the one time when I showed up on Azuri, everyone was like, "Dude, are you okay? Are you sure?" But with Wes, with you, it's we never really know what you're gonna bring, and you're kind of the first person I go. Not kind of, you were the first person I go to when we're talking about how do I play this deck? You did very, very well in draft and the last was it RTN season? When were you against Team Ascent every finals? It was Bright Lights for
ProQuest, just for ProQuest for the upcoming Pro Tour LA.
Yeah, so part of this podcast is Blake actually hit me up and he was like, "Yo, you guys should do like specialist first," and I was like, "My dude,
Oh, we
it's
already on
literally
it.
the next episode. Just wait a couple weeks."
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But selfishly, I love to pick your brain because I know for me to get good at anything, I have to do like for me to get good at Flesh and Blood. What I did was I found a hero that
Mhm.
was similar to a hero that I played or a deck style that I played in other games, card games
Right.
previously. And then like I went all in. And then for me to learn the other matchups and stuff, I was able to learn it through the lens of Katsu. Right? So like I know how to
Right.
beat Dromai and Bravo and all these things, but I don't really know the intricacies of those heroes. I know how to play against them as Katsu.
Makes
But
sense.
we were at I think it was Dallas or Vegas, and I asked someone. Michael Hamilton was there, and he was eating a sandwich, and I was like, "Dude, what does that guy play?" And someone looked at me, and they're like, "He plays everything," and I was like, "Damn it!" I was really hoping that that wasn't the answer.
Yeah, yeah.
For someone like you, where you have the ability to like read the meta, make an educated guess, and then pilot a deck that is good into that meta, where other people like me are like, "Oh, I really hope Katsu's good into this meta, like, or else I'm kind of screwed. Like, or else I'm gonna have to like really
Right,
learn."
right.
But the learning curve for me is so much steeper. Like, I really, really, really have to play hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of games before I feel like that level of mastery. So half of it
Mhm.
is I just thought this would be a really good topic to talk about. Other people locally and not locally were talking about it, but selfishly, dude, how did you end up being able to play multiple different decks? And did you start off in Flesh and Blood that way?
So I definitely did not start off that way. I actually started on. So when I first started playing with Tuck, we went to a shop that only did Blitz. Um, so we went there on, I believe it was Wednesdays or Thursdays at the time, and then on Saturdays we had CC at Dungeons and Javas, which was one of the first places in Colorado to run events. Shout out to them. But I started on Lexi because whenever we first started, the first like event that we went to was a Tails pre-release, and so we both were like, we're gonna choose a new hero. So Tucker chose Oldhim, and I chose Lexi, and we spent hours upon hours grinding that matchup. But yeah, so I actually started on Lexi, and then later moved to Prism. And I wouldn't say that I really became a generalist until Prism LL'd, and it sort of became a I don't. It was me kind of waffling, I guess, on what I wanted to do, and then I was realizing as I was playing all these different decks and all these different play styles that it was way easier to learn certain matchups. Like if I'm going to play Phi into Bravo, there's something to be said about playing as the Bravo. Rather than just me playing as Phi into Bravo, you should see the reverse side of the matchup. So just playing a lot of different decks into each other gives you a wider view of how they play, their play patterns, maybe players' thought patterns as they're playing, like objectives of the deck. Um, Things like that is how I started. So definitely didn't start there, but moved there, I guess, due to the loss of my baby girl prison.
So you would say that you maybe almost started off as more of a specialist and then took that knowledge or how you learned that deck and then moved that to more of like a generalist.
So I started on Prism, which is what I would consider when I started to get like competitive with the game because I played Lexi and she wasn't very good at the time. Oldhim was just like a really really rough matchup. We didn't have Three Oak, we didn't have Rain Razors. We were missing a lot of tools that Lexi has now that she didn't back then. So it's just a really rough
You
matchup.
mean
So I
tools that
decided I wanted
Lexi
to
had?
had. Well, yeah, true, true, true,
Get
true,
out
true.
of
She
here!
gone.
Get
She
out of
gone. She
here!
didn't protect her deck. Her deck is no longer needed to be protected. um, but yeah, so I moved to Prism just because I've always kind of like light themed things. Like I play paladins and clerics and stuff in other like RPG type games. So naturally I drifted to that. I didn't really like Bolton, so Illusionist was what I went to. Another kind of key component of that was since it was just me and Tucker playing kitchen table a lot, and the scene wasn't as big as it is now. It was a lot of ruling questions that we had, and especially with like Spectra judges, Spectra is like very contentious, I guess I'll say, as a mechanic in terms of it's very hard to know. intuitively what happens when you attack a Spectra with like certain triggers and like on attacks and just effects in general. There's a lot of weird interactions in Lucius in general. Not even including Spectra at all. There's just a lot of, we have instant speed stuff, so there's a lot of weird interactions. So I actually became a judge because of that. So I learned the game very deeply initially due to playing Illusionist. And while it was like a very high skill ceiling and I got destroyed a lot of times, we played a lot of matchups of Tucker just destroying me on Runeblade and other stuff like that. Sorry, what was the original
No,
question?
that was good, dude. I was typing. You literally, I have like four more forks that I'm going to go to because of what you just said, and they were all really good. The one thing that you started saying was you started to play other heroes because you wanted to get better insight into the matchup from the hero that you actually wanted to play. And I cannot,
Right.
guys and gals, if you are trying to get better at Flesh and Blood, take that advice. Broughton, again, I shouted him out last time. He's my Katsu coach. I was having the hardest time, like most new players when they first start playing Flesh and Blood, against Dorinthia, because a lot of it is a knowledge check. Every time you do something, you're like, oh, if I block, I get blown out. If I don't block, I get blown out. What the hell? And the first thing he said, he was like, play 20 games as Dorinthia. Go on Talishar right now, take the best list, play 20 games so that you can know what's going to happen and oh my God, that was like, first off, I hated it because I didn't want to play anything except Katsu. But like, dude, man, I'm going to say it again. This is the third time. If you want to get better at Flesh and Blood and you're having a problem with the specific matchup, play it from the other side. Even if it's just 10 or 20 games, because I got to learn like more of the patterns that Dorinthia can do. I learned like when Dorinthia bricks, you know what I mean? It was like it was much easier to take advantage of the hero, because if you don't play it, sometimes it just feels like this like fog of unbeatableness because you're not actually touching the cards and stuff. So that's interesting. Yeah. So that's how you started. So you went and kind of played the reverse to get better.
Right. And to expand on that a little bit, one of the bigger things I think is recognizing the play patterns before they're deep into them, if that makes any sense. So like, for example, when Fi, pitches a red card, it's very obvious from that point, sort of like you can predict what his turn is going to look like. Similarly, like Dory doesn't throw a go again sort of thing. So you're like, okay, maybe this is Glint, maybe this is Blade Runner, maybe this is whatever. Like every bit of information in Flesh and Blood is like an invaluable piece of the puzzle for making the optimal decision at any given point. And you can't really make those decisions without understanding what your opponent is aiming for and what they're potentially trying to, if they're trying to bluff something, if they're trying to aim for like set up a dominate with a Steel Blade Supremacy, if they're trying to just throw a blade at you and they don't really have anything else. It's a lot of information that you will just miss out on if you're not familiar with the card pool and their play patterns.
That makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense. And people already, we have been recording for 13 minutes and 22 seconds now, are going to completely understand why I brought you on for this. Because take your notes out. I'm going to have to watch this. I'm doing the episode, and I'm going to have to watch it several times because, oh my God, this is golden. I told you. We got to get you on a microphone and get the word out, man. You said a couple other things. This has nothing to do with anything, but I just want to, real quick, do you think it's valuable to become a judge from a player perspective? Do you think it made you a better player?
Absolutely. Understanding the interactions is super important to understanding the game in general. There are certain like edge cases, I guess I'll call them, where if you don't understand how it works, you might miss out on an optimal play line because you didn't understand that. For example, something that came up, I think, at Pro Tour 1, I believe Easton Douglas, great player up in Denver, something he told me and Tuck that we didn't know at the time was, and this is just an example, was there's a card called Endless Winter. Endless Winter says, if this is fused, whenever you block, your opponent gets a frostbite. So the way that works with defense reactions is it's a trigger that goes on a stack. So in reaction step, you play a defense reaction, Endless Winter triggers. You don't have to let that resolve. You can play another defense reaction and not have to pay that one. So what some players would do is they would play the defense reaction, get the frostbite, and then try and play another defense reaction, but now you have to pay 1 because you have the frostbite. But if you hold priority correctly and you understand how priority works in Flesh and
Could you
Blood, it's
play
triggered
2
from
in
the
that
stack in
window and
general.
not? Could you play 2 in that window and not get any?
You would get the frostbite still. You just wouldn't have to pay to use your defense reaction. So the stack would look like this. It would be defense reactions. Let's say I play Sink Below. Endless Winter would then go on the stack. I would not let this resolve. Assuming Easton passes priority and doesn't have an attack reaction, or I don't know why I'm saying I'm playing against Easton, since he was the one who told us
Nah,
this.
kill him, bro. Get him, man. He's top 4. He's top 4 worlds. Beat him, bro. Come on.
So let's say, this triggers on the stack, and then we play another defense reaction. So now the stack is defense reaction, Endless Winter trigger, defense reaction, Endless Winter trigger. So I don't get those frostbites until those triggers resolve. So then we can reverse back down the stack and resolve it, and I'll get 2 frostbites, and I'll have 2 defense reactions, but I don't have to pay for them.
Yeah, because
there's a lot of edge cases like that.
Brody
where,
Spurlock had one recently that would be more maybe easier for people to understand. That was good though. I mean, the Frost isn't around anymore. It was with the mech stuff, right? So the mech, there's a mech card that's like, well, all the items they say like if you can choose to take a counter off. If you don't, it goes to your grave. So you can say, even if it has counters that you can drop off, you can say, I choose not to take a counter off, which would put it in the graveyard. And then you can use it for, what's the keyword that grabs it from the graveyard?
For mech?
Yeah. Where it's like, if this is in your graveyard, you do, I think it starts with an S. I can't remember. I hate that set.
I know there's the backup protocols that will grab stuff from your graveyard.
Scrap.
Oh, scrap. Oh, you're talking about limited. Okay. I thought you were talking about like dash.
I mean, no. I mean, but you know what I mean?
Yeah,
so
yeah.
His whole thing was like, read the card. It says you may. So there was very, I guess what you were saying, like fringe cases, like, like these outliers where it's like, it's going to come up 1 in 100 games, but maybe it wins you that one game, like when it does come up.
Right.
Where he was like, there was a time that it came up and he had nothing to scrap and he wanted to. And so he was like, I'm choosing to not take the counter off. It goes to graveyard. Now I scrap and do the whole thing. Just the last question about this judging thing, because I want to go back to like the other topic. What level of judging do you think is appropriate for if someone like me is just trying to get better at the game but doesn't necessarily want to be a judge? What's like what in your opinion would be like the limit? I know there's like level 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever judging. At some point, I feel like it'd probably fall off. Like you're too into the judging. What part would be like, if a player, do you think they should do level 1, the pre-level 1, just study for level 1, don't need to take it, level 2? Like, what do you think?
So my recommendation is, well, first of all, the way it works is there's currently, I believe, 3 levels that I'm aware of. There's 0, 1, and then 2. 2 is mostly for like regional level, like if you need to understand something or like organizer type things. That's mostly what level 2s are. Level 1s are going to be your judges at like your armories. Most of your floor judges at callings, pro tours, stuff like that are all going to be your level 1 judges. And they also have level 0, which I believe is like a pre-level 1. I'm not super familiar with level 0 because I think it was implemented maybe after I became level 1. I can't recall correctly, but my recommendation regardless would be level 1 is good to strive for. You don't necessarily need to take the test, but there's no con to taking it. Like if you're like one of those people that need something to motivate you to put effort towards something, like I am, the level 1 test is a great thing to aim for. It makes you go and learn the tournament policy, which a lot of players are not familiar with. The rules, there are a lot of like orderings on like the combat and turn orders in general. There's a lot of confusion there. A lot of the judge questions that I usually get at armories and stuff like that are usually relating to how things resolve in terms of like the stack and then also like the combat chain. So definitely like reading through those rules, like literally just reading through them is a great way to start. And then if you, like I said, if you're like me, you need something to push you to like a goal you're trying to aim for, essentially, level 1 test is a great thing to aim for.
Dude, I would have saved me the IP penalty at Vegas, man.
Yeah, that was an awkward moment, man. We were all like looking around.
But that's like a good, that's a good. So Mac had given me, Mac is like a local guy in Spring. Shout out to Mac. Shout out to Spring. Shout out to everybody in Colorado. Shout out to the world. Mac had given me a good recommendation. He's like, you guys should do a podcast when you guys get back from LA, which is going to be multiple, very, very many Wednesdays from now. But when we go to LA, he's like, you should do a podcast that's on like the difference between showing up to like a casual local armory versus like your first big tournament or a big tournament. And that was the one thing I said. I was like, man, I got hit with an IP penalty for something I didn't even know. So what Wes said there is like spot on. Like, know the rules, and we will do that podcast because there are like little, there's rules that you wouldn't know if you were just going to an armory, and everyone knew I wasn't cheating. It wasn't anything about that. It's just like there are rules that get enforced to stop people from abusing them. And I got caught. I didn't know it. And all my teammates, it was so funny, man. All you guys were like, felt bad. You were like, oh no, we knew he didn't know. But it's just one of those. There's a million of them, right? I can't expect. Brian was the same thing. Everyone, I turned back and everyone was like, we're so sorry. And I'm like, no, man, it's fine. I'm still taking this game. I'm still taking this game. I almost did, though. I misplayed. I could have won that if I didn't misplay. I didn't lose that game.
It was such a good game, dude.
I didn't lose that game because of an IP penalty. I lost that game because I fucking misplayed.
It was a great game.
It was
really good. You had some very timely. What was that blue defense reaction we were running?
Hold the line, baby.
Hold the line, yes, dude. Oh, that was such a good game. Okay,
yeah, that card is goated. So do you think then, because I see this happen, there's a lot of parallels between fighting games and Flesh and Blood. And,
for sure.
Straight up, anyone out there playing Guilty Gear, I might be 35, I might be a boomer, but if you still want to catch some hands in a fighting game, let's go. But that's one of the things that, when I started playing Flesh and Blood, I immediately felt that, which was like, I was already good at fighting games, and I was good at card games, and I was like, holy shit, someone made a game specifically for me that I didn't hear about yet. So when I found Flesh and Blood, I was like, this is amazing. And
right.
There's a lot of parallels, so I'm going to go back and forth, because when I was playing fighting games, being a specialist is exactly how I got good at those too. I didn't really play anything else. But I see it happen with fighting games. I see it happen with Flesh and Blood. I see it happen locally, not locally, where before someone becomes a specialist and really, really puts time into a hero or a class or a deck, they bounce around all over the place. Do you think that the most effective way would be to do the path that you did and kind of start as a specialist and then take those skills and knowledge that you know and branch off and then become a generalist? Or do you think that, because after this I want to talk about pros and cons of both, or do you think that there's like a world where you can kind of walk in and just be like, I'm going to play a little bit of this, a little bit of that, I'm going to be a generalist, and just start off that way?
Yeah, so in terms of where you're starting, I guess I'll give you like a little bit more of a concrete timeline for how it went for me. I think there was about 2 or 3 months from me starting the game to essentially moving into Prism. And then I think Prism was legal from that, I think it was a January or something that I started playing Prism, until the end of whatever it was, like Everfest Meta, I believe, which I think was about 4 to 5 months. It was shortly after, what's that, RTN season, I want to say? I think it was an RTN season. I think it was that RTN season of 22 that she LL'd, shortly after Everfest, and also Pro Tour 1 for that matter. So there was about, I want to say 5-6 months where I was effectively a specialist. I don't know that I would recommend that everybody go that path in particular, just because the hero that I chose was maybe a little bit more complex than what I would recommend for most people to start on. Illusionist in general, I think, is a very complex class, and that's like a whole another topic in and of itself. But yeah, in terms of starting like generalist versus specialist, I think starting generalist is good if you're somebody who picks things up very quickly and can understand the nature of things, if that makes any sense.
Do you think that's like a very specific kind of person, though? Like if
I think
someone
so.
you
Yeah,
didn't
that's
know.
what I'm saying.
Okay. And I agree. And I wasn't trying to lead you there. I was honestly, again, half of this podcast will always be selfish. People that are listening, I will never ask a question that I don't want the answer to selfishly. So that's why I'm asking Wes, because I value his opinion. I wasn't trying to like, yo, get over here with this answer. But like, I think I agree, because there are people that I think of that when they bounce around on lists, they never get to see the true potential of the list before they hop off of it. And I feel like they get real close and they're like, oh, I want to try this. I want to try this and I want to try this. And I think that's fine. But I think like you kind of have to be the unique snowflake to do that. I don't think most people learn that way. Yeah, you know what I mean? Like, I think you kind of have to, but you said something I didn't even think of. And like, we can go, and I don't want the whole thing to be about like how to pick your main, but I know there's like a lot of overlap. And that was like the video that we had done before.
Right.
That was like a super good point that you said. So like, if you're starting off, it's not just about being a specialist and finding something that you like. It might be finding something that you like that's maybe not the hardest deck to pilot, right? Like,
Right.
so if
Right.
you,
Right.
so like, let's say if you were gonna ask someone, they were like, "Yo, Wes, I'm gonna play this game Flesh of Blood, and like, I want to main something, but I don't know how to." I think that's like a pretty good starting point. Like, you don't have to pick the easiest hero, but you're right. Like, it
No,
would be tough if I came into the game and started playing like
just
Icelander.
like random stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, or like just a deck that's like kind of
Oh,
harder to
the
play.
complicated.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you know what
Yeah.
I mean? Like, Katsu's not the easiest deck to play, but he's not the hardest. And I liked Katsu
Yeah.
because I felt like the floor was low and the ceiling is very high.
I agree with that. One other thing I would say about Illusionist, and since you mentioned Icelander, Wizard in particular, is a lot of people in Flesh and Blood like to say they're not playing Flesh and Blood, Illusionist and Wizard. They're playing a different game, which I kind of agree with. And the reason I would definitely caution people against starting on those types of or those classes is I can't think of another better way to say it, but they're not playing the normal game of Flesh and Blood. Like Illusionist is building board state, Wizard is doing like lots of instant speed stuff, and their goal is generally much different than your typical like attack reaction, defense reaction sort of based hero. And that's the core of the game. So you're missing some of the core of the game by playing those heroes at least initially. I think it's better to start personally. I think it's better to start on a generic aggro deck, so some kind of like Katsu, Fi, Briar, she's gone, but that sort of thing.
Yeah.
It's sort of not basic, but something that'll give you
Like the
a
fundamentals.
wide breadth of the game. Exactly, your fundamentals. And I think you miss that if you start on those heroes, or if you start by jumping between too many heroes in the same vein. If you're jumping between a bunch of different things, you're missing out on some of the realizations or the epiphanies you might have if you're sticking on one hero about like the things like the tempo of the game, when to use your armor, when to like buy yourself turns, like that sort of thing. You can kind of miss out on that just by like I don't know if I'm playing like Katsu one week and then Fi another week and then I'm playing Kano one week. Like I'm just jumping all over the place. I'm missing. It'll probably take me longer to get to the core aspects of the game. That is what makes you fundamentally a strong player. You're just missing out on that experience. And I think it's the same for fighting games. Since we're mentioning that comparison, I think starting with an easier or maybe more simple hero in fighting games is the best way to learn mechanics. Because like when you're first starting a fighting game, like what are you learning? You're learning like how to block correctly. You're learning spacing. You're learning like what are your move sets. You're learning what am I looking for against my opponents, like that sort of thing.
Even like easy
Um,
combo strings and stuff like that. And you're right, dude. Oh my god, yeah. Sorry, keep going. You're just like hitting so many points that are like spot on. Yes.
yeah, I didn't have too much more to add to that.
I think about League of Legends when you say something like that, and
Yeah,
when someone and like I like using League as like a general because like everyone play not everyone but most people play League,
a
have
lot of
watched a
people.
game
Yeah,
of League, they know what I'm talking about,
right,
and
right.
like I mean I'm guilty of some of this too, but I played for a long time. I'm not very good, but I'm okay, and I played for a long time. But like you'll see, no one wants to start playing League unlike Garen. They want to start like I'm gonna play Lee Sin or like the
Right, right.
hardest champion where you have to land every single skill shot and you have to be a
Yeah,
god to
yeah.
even get anything done. You're right, man. It's like so much easier to learn the game and the fundamentals. And back to your point of like if I dabble in this hero and then dabble in this hero, you might get like 50% effective across the board, but you'll just like you lose to anyone that has like a good grasp on their actual deck because you won't hit the point of like that level of mastery, right?
Right,
Like, and
right.
that's what I'm striving for, man. Because you guys know, I have multiple decks built. I want to learn. I'm so stoked to learn draft. Like, I know how to play draft, but I'm stoked to like really learn how to play draft. If I can
Guys,
get
yeah,
as good as I feel as I am on Katsu with these other heroes, I feel like I'll be a menace. But I also know
yeah,
how much
definitely.
time I put into that. You know what I mean? So it's like, it's tough, man. But you're right. You're right. I think people don't give the hero people that start off as generalists and don't really like find one thing to learn the core and the fundamentals and tempo and all these things because Like, I've played nothing but Katsu since April, and I am still learning so much about the game. Like, we were talking about Easton's article on Tempo, and it's like,
Yeah.
dude, I've traveled and played all this and done this, and like I had an idea of like the value that people put on cards, but not in a way that he outlined it. And to read an article, or I actually listened to, was On the Bobble, Off the Bobble, the Yuki Lee Bender podcast.
Yeah,
There's
yeah.
there's
I
a
don't
new
remember what it's called, but yeah.
there's a new one out a couple days ago, maybe today, and I was listening to it at the gym, and they're talking about all these things, and I'm still be able to apply these concepts to Katsu, and I've played nothing but Katsu since I've started playing Flesh. Like, Wes knows how much time I've put into Katsu. It's insane.
So much Katsu.
Yeah, but like then you hear these things, or like even off of this podcast, you're giving me insight, and I listen to this, and I talk to Easton, and I talk to the guys from Advantage Games and Broughton and all these things, and you're able to take these little bits of knowledge and then apply it to the hero that you're trying to master. I do feel like all the time that I put on Katsu or one hero, like you, will help me learn something faster than I did before. But it's tough because LSS has set up the game in a way where like specialists aren't going to win worlds. Like, a specialist isn't going to, or, I mean, they could, but like you look at the best players in the world, and they're pivoting off of Yuki Lee Bender was on Lexi and was like crushing, and then brought Bolton to the last thing, and players like Yanji Lee, or like every time it's like, what is he on? He brought Uzi to the last thing, you know what I mean? Was on Lexi before. Yeah. And that's the kind of player that I want to strive to be. I mean, Easton is another. We're going to bring up Easton multiple times, right? Easton was playing a bunch of other things, had a conversation with Tuck and one other person about Tank Dash, and then top forward with it. I'm looking at that, and I'm like, oh my God, what does that feel like? Like, when you showed up to the armory, then you're like, I'm bringing Dorian. I'm like, dude, I would take Charlie, another teammate of ours. He says that when I read cards for the first time, I look like a toddler. Like, my mouth is like open, and I'm like, what does this say? And like Katsu, I'm like Kadachi for one, like bah, 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 just throwing the cards out. I get so envious of players like you and these people that can just kind of like bring any deck to the event, and we can like kind of bridge that into like the pros and cons of being a specialist or a generalist. But I think at like the very listen, if you're going to an armory and you're just playing with your buds, it's totally fine. Play one hero and do the thing until they get LL'd, and you can have fun, and you can be very successful with that. Like, I have I've beaten players that are better than me at Flesh and Blood. I have beaten them. First off, it's cards. There's variance and there's luck. But second off, like, man, if you're a generalist, you better know your shit, because you're going to go up against someone that only plays that thing. But the problem is let's say Victor is super good in this next meta, and he's like Oldham levels of oppressive. I can't bring Katsu to LA. So I'm going to have to learn something. If you want to compete at the highest level, you're going to have to do something like Wes and these other great players have done, where they're able to adapt the knowledge and stuff that they get from maybe starting off as a specialist and then branching out into other things. The meta is always going to be evolving and changing. And as much as like we want the game to be fully balanced where you can play Levia at a high level currently, it's just not like that. You have to be able to pivot.
There's a couple points I wanted to make going off of that. One of the things that makes, or I guess putting it more succinctly, one of the things that makes being a specialist early on in your career as like a card game player of BAB is once you reach a certain level of familiarity with your own deck, you kind of lean into muscle memory. And again, going back to fighting games, like once I've learned the combos, once I've learned how to space myself, once I've learned how to block, once I've learned how to read my opponent, I can focus less on just doing the combo, just doing my inputs correctly, and I can focus more on the meta of the game I'm currently playing. So like, I'm not even talking about like the widespread meta. I'm talking about the meta of me versus you. Like me trying to read what your facial expressions. Like I act like I'm gonna block or something. Like I'm thinking about blocking or whatever. I like separate cards in my hand and maybe you react or something. Like it lets me focus on more of outside of the cards parts of the game. I'm sure people who've been longtime card game players have had moments where like you look up, like you're playing with a friend in an armory and you have two floating and you look up at him and he just gives you the biggest shit-eating grin. You're like, this dude has pummel for sure.
Tuck does it all the time. You know when Tuck has pummel. He'll almost point to it. He'll be like, two floating?
By the way.
Just so you know.
it lets you focus on more of that aspect, the mental aspect. That's what the word I was looking for. It lets you focus on the mental aspect of the game, and also the bigger picture. It lets you focus on, like, in this matchup, I need to save threats for cycle 2 because he's going to try and fatigue me, or I need to play to this power card because Azalea is just going to interrupt me over and over and over again, and I just need to wait for my spot, sort of thing. It lets you focus on the bigger aspect, or the bigger picture, and also the mental aspects of the game, which is, I think, where the true skill in card games lies. Is the bigger picture, especially in Fab. It's a huge part of the card game, because I think most players could reach pretty quickly a point at which they're just evaluating their hands. Like, okay, this card attacks for 4, this card attacks for 3, this card attacks for 3, and this card blocks for 3. Like, and you just do the math on, like, what gives you the most value out of your hand. Which is, I think, kind of unique to Flesh and Blood due to the way, like, redrawing your hand every turn works. The hand cycles you're trying to usually, obviously this is like a general thing, and Easton touches on this in his article, which I highly recommend, by the way. But yeah, just like getting the most value out of every hand can frequently just win you games. Like, you don't necessarily need to be doing big picture, but you can win games just off of that.
Dude, you're so right, man. Yuki Lee Bender literally said it, and so the latest podcast, which again I recommend it. It'll be secret. It's not actually Wednesday. We're recording this, so it came out today, but today will be 2 weeks from whatever. So hopefully it's still the latest, but they did the podcast on how to like evaluate drafting heavy hitters before, like how to approach a new set, and she said that exact thing. She was like, if your deck just like consistently can just do like good value, you'll usually just win on. Like, you can just win games off of that. You can go 3-0 in a draft just off of that. That's like
Right,
so
definitely.
important. Yeah, and the other thing you said is like so, dude. We're at 36 minutes. We're probably going to go for like another 10. We could go for 2 hours. I mean, I'm going to have all you guys on this multiple times, but you have so much information to get out. The freeing up of brain space is something that I didn't really think of until right now. And
It's
Peter,
so big.
yeah, Peter, another one of our teammates, was talking about like, yeah, if you're like, when you play Katsu, you already know the lines. You're on muscle memory. Memorize the other person's pitch stack completely. Like, I could be doing, and that's that's like the next level of, and we were talking about this. I think you were there. I mean, you were probably there. We're always together. But someone was saying something about reading your opponent, and I was like, dude, one of the biggest things, and this is so big, but you're right. The baseline of Flesh and Blood is being able to look at your hand and being able, how do I get the most value, and what's the line, and how do I, the baseline is that. When I go to these events, I will throw out a Kadachi, and a lot of times, instantly, no blocks. Okay, I'll throw a second, no blocks. And I'm like, oh, someone in your locals told you to never block Kadachis. I am throwing 2 Kadachis every turn, even if it's not the most optimal line, because you are taking 2 every single turn at least.
Turn. Yeah.
And then there's the opposite too, where every single time they block the second Kadachi with a piece of armor, and I'm like, oh, bet, okay, I'm sending 2, because what are you gonna do when you have no more armor? Exactly. They give me a card, and it's like,
you're leaning into their play patterns. You're learning, you're conditioning them to do something, and then you play around that. Yeah.
It's just really hard to pick up on those things if you don't have what you're saying, like a mastery of.
Right.
I will say though, and Tuck talked about this, there is a downside to this. And I think it's maybe if you have so many reps on something and you don't feel motivated, or I think maybe we solved it here, right? If you feel like you have such a good grasp on your deck that you don't need to be doing outside things like reading your opponent and picking up on their habits and counting their or memorizing their pitch stack, you will go on autopilot and sometimes not make the most motivated or inspired or even the best lines, because you're just like, oh, this is the turn. Okay, I've seen this hand 100 times.
Yeah, exactly.
So
you're just ignoring context outside of that, and you're just like, I've done this before. I've seen these cards before. I'm just going to do what I've done before, sort of thing. Yeah,
but
you just go on autopilot. Like
what you're saying, and I completely agree with, is like that's the exact time to take advantage of like the other things that you can be leveling up on. And you've seen me play, dude. Like, and not an army. An army, we're chilling. We'll go outside. We'll smoke some of Colorado's finest. We're just, you know what I mean? We're having a good time. We're testing, and it's fun. When you see me at an event, I am looking through your soul. I am not taking my
Absolutely.
eyes off of your eyes, and that's because I already know what my cards do. I know what they say. As soon as I draw them, I'm like, cool. Now I'm looking at you. Show me like a kink in that armor. Show me a weakness. Show me
Right.
like when you draw your hand, you're like, and I'm like, oh, I got you now. Like you will
It
never
goes
see me.
back.
I can draw Lord of Wind, Lord of Wind, Lord of
Yeah.
Wind, a fourth Lord of Wind because I accidentally put it in there, and I'm like,
Judge.
no, I'm like, all right, let's go. Like, you will never know that off of me. I will never give you
Yeah,
that
yeah.
information. But you're right. You have to have a certain level of like mastery and comfort on the list before you can start doing those things. And like, some people might be listening to you and being like, man, that's too much. If you are a casual player and you're not trying to be super competitive, then like, fuck the other person's pitch stack. Fuck reading them. Like, go there and play cards. Flesh and Blood
Yeah, yeah.
doesn't have to be super competitive for everyone. But if you're traveling and you're going to an event and you're actually trying to win, you have to know that at least players like myself, Wes, and everyone else on our team are doing these things. So there's
Exactly, yeah.
layers and levels to all this and things that we're not doing that other people are doing. There's players that will remember both players' pitch decks with 100% accuracy while they're playing their deck the best. So it's not good enough just to play your deck the best. And if you don't want to care about pitch deck, you play Katsu. You're shuffling your deck every turn anyway. You see that Art of War I just pitched? It's probably right back on top, baby.
I'll see that again.
But that's also one of the reasons, like, to go back to finding your main and picking something that's simple. I mean, you got to be crazy if you don't think that that part of it, when I was talking to Tuck and he was talking about pitch stacking, and I was like, wait, if I'm playing Katsu, I'm shuffling. So two things are beneficial there. One, I don't really need to be thinking about my pitch stack, but two, when I'm against a player that's better than me and they're memorizing my pitch stack, they can't use that as a disadvantage to me.
Right.
It kind of breaks that. And there's certain heroes I think that can get away with doing things like that. Like you said, that would make the game and learning the game easier, at least in the beginning, so that you can learn those fundamentals. And I remember, if there's any other Hearthstone degenerates out, the first deck I learned how to play was Zulok. And it wasn't because it was the best deck. It was the best deck at teaching you how to trade efficiently. Like what a value trade
board
is.
efficiently,
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly. And once you learn that, you're
Yeah.
like, oh. But people will jump in. They're like, well, I want to learn OTK Mechathune. And you're like, you're playing solid. You're not even playing Hearthstone. You're playing. Now Hearthstone is like out of control. But dude, you
Yeah, I
said
haven't
so
played in a
many
while,
things.
but-
Yeah. That was spot on.
One other thing I wanted to mention about generalists versus specialists, I guess we can kind of transition into the pros versus cons with this. But one of the things that you'll lack as a specialist is the meta in card games is always changing. There's sets coming out, what, 3 times a year, 4 times a year, I think they're aiming for, something like that. And each time the new set is coming out, the meta is changing. Each time a new ban list comes out, there's a decent chance the meta is going to change. There's a chance they hit some cards and a deck becomes tier 2 instead of tier 1 or something like that. Or maybe banning a card from a tier 1 deck makes all of a sudden this tier 2 deck a lot better because now they're not shut out by that one card. Like thinking of Warmongers, things like that. Being a generalist lets you adapt more easily and quicker than being a specialist, which in a card game where the meta is constantly changing, like I just said, that's like invaluable. If you're a competitive player, you have to be able to adapt to the meta. You have not only do you have to be able to adapt to it, but typically you want to be able to predict it. And how are you going to know what heroes are going to be good if you don't even know what the hero's strengths are? If you don't know what the hero's weaknesses are? If I'm looking at Lexi and Katsu and Fi as like big aggro decks in the meta, and I don't know what are the counters to them, or like what are their weaknesses. Like Lexi doesn't block well, Ninja, like Katsu doesn't really block well, Fi blocks well, but those two don't. So like maybe there's something there, or stuff like that. Just stuff that like you wouldn't be able to gather as intuitively or as easily as if you were a generalist, if you're a specialist. Granted, like we said, starting on specialists, like fundamentals, you have to get those down first, for sure.
Ah, man, I cannot agree more. And like a lot of the things you said are things that I'm not currently able to do, but it's everything that I'm working on. I've really played a lot of other heroes outside of Katsu over this off season. I will almost certainly be bringing Katsu to LA. It's not like I'm gonna need to play something else, but like there are diminishing returns after you hit a certain level of what you're learning, and all the best players are saying what Wes is saying. A lot of them are saying, I mean, to echo Mark, right? Iron Lion Mark, Team Taco Mark, he said something too. He was like, I think the best path is to lean into a generalist outside of becoming like go from being a specialist to then a generalist. And I really
Absolutely.
do think like you said, there are going to be outliers. There's going to be like the unique snowflake, the prodigy that comes in and is able to pick up every deck and just kind of play a bunch of stuff. But I'm not that. Most people aren't that, and I pride myself on how smart and how good of a player I think I am. But I also know how I learn. I got to get beat up a lot, and then I start to
Yeah.
pick up on
Same.
it. And
Yeah.
again, to quote that the Yuki Lee Bender podcast, they said a master has lost more than you've played. It's not about
Mm,
people that win all the time, right? A master at something has lost more times than you've played. And if you looked at my
absolutely.
Katsu stats when I first started playing, man, I was horrible. I was tanking those stats on Talishar. It looked like Katsu was fucking ass cheeks tier. But I just know like I have to get beat by something a million times before I'm like, I won't let that happen again.
Right. Right.
Yeah, but you're right, man. Like I think that's the way. So if we're gonna like spark notes this, and you kind of anyone listening wants to get, it's like start off as a specialist and pick a hero that is going to teach you the fundamentals of the game, and is doesn't have to be the easiest hero, but pick something that's easy to learn and will express like what the game actually is. Don't pick one of these like off the rails heroes that you're kind of
Right.
playing a different game, because it will make that pivot even harder when you go to like learn something else.
Right. Exactly.
Specialize in that thing up to a point where then you can flex on these other skills like reading your opponent or memorizing pitch stack, looking through their soul so they don't even want to look you in the eyes when you play against them. All these things are are good things to bring to a tournament, and then from there take everything that you learn and then be able to hop around and jump around. And I'm on my way,
Yeah.
dude. But I'll tell you what, man, I respect you as a player.
I
Every
appreciate
time,
that.
yeah, I respect you as a player. And you said, like, what are you gonna do if you can't read the meta? My answer is, I know Wes, bro. I got a whole team, and we're gonna do a podcast on like.
Hey, we got a whole team.
That's what I'm
Right.
saying. We're gonna definitely do one on like the benefits of having a team, because I think some of the benefits of being on a team are some of them are very, very obvious, and then a lot of them,
Right.
especially me being on Blood Rush Fellows, a lot of them came. I didn't realize like some of the other
Hmm.
benefits, and some of them are like accountability and just like motivation and how
Definitely.
inspired your plays are and stuff like that. We're definitely gonna have that one. I want to bring on like four of us and kind of talk about
Yeah.
what each of us have gotten from being on the team, because again, like you surround yourself with a bunch of people that you vibe with, and
Yeah.
all of a sudden, like, I mean, you guys have been playing and you guys were had results, and like Kaywood came on and he was like the eighth person to like kind of bring everything together.
Finish our draft pod. Yeah.
And every event that we've gone to, someone has done very exceptionally well from like that
Yeah.
point. So listen to Wes, because I do. Wes is the first person that I go to if I need to like a meta read, and he's laughing, but he knows it's true, because like there was things I was learning about Katsu, and Wes wasn't even playing Katsu, and he was just telling me information from like his foundation. And he was like, "Nah, I think you really want to play this card and this card, and this will be good." And we went back and tested it, and I was like, "Dude, you're 1,000% right." Like,
Yeah. And I want to
yeah,
touch on that real quick, if you don't mind.
yeah, of course.
Speaking of, I think I know the instance you're talking about, or one that came to mind
I was
anyway
gonna
when
say
you
there's
mentioned
a
that.
few.
Yeah, fair enough. But one of the things that being a like specialist versus generalist, like pros and cons, sort of going back to that, is matchups are massive in this game. Like you can play like a Phi into like one hero over and over and over again, and then think you're really good at Phi, and then you go play against Icelander, you go play against Lexi or LL heroes, but you get the point. You go play against a hero that's much different from that hero, and maybe requires a much different game plan. And that's another thing about being specialist, especially in Flesh and Blood, benefits you early on, is you become very familiar with what your goal is into each of your matchups, which is super, super important. Now, to take that to the next level, obviously, like we said earlier, you want to play that other hero so you can kind of understand their play patterns and their thoughts and everything while playing a matchup. But starting as a specialist or starting as a generalist, it's very hard to win games in Flesh and Blood if you start as a generalist, because it's very matchup dependent. Like your goal in every single matchup and your sideboard is very different. depending on who you're playing against. Like how you block, how like what is your big picture game plan? Even your turn to turn can be very different. Like maybe I don't throw an attack because he has a ton of armor, or like and I prioritize arsenals, or prioritize getting a defense reaction against Bravos so they can't get dominate, like stuff like that. Um, Matchups are super important. I just wanted to make that point real quick before
No,
we
that's I'm
went
so glad
too
you
much
did.
further.
Yeah, because there's other card games where you can kind of learn your deck, and it's like if your deck does the thing before the other deck does, you win. I think most card
Right.
games are actually like that, which is why I
Yeah.
think Flesh and Blood is so successful. Anyone that has started off as a specialist, you already know that like how you play against one thing and how you play against another thing are completely different. And if you're a
Right.
new player and you're like, oh, the sideboard, it's only a couple cards difference. It is everything in this game. Like,
It is
do
everything.
not when I would show up to the first armories, I just brought my 60. I was like, it's 10 cards, like or however many cards I can fit. So this doesn't even
Yeah. Yeah.
matter.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh my god, it's everything. Most of the time, the cards that I'm changing in and out are the sideboard cards. They're not even mainboard cards. It's like, how do I tech in
Mhm.
for a specific
Yeah.
meta? But no, that's spot on, dude. Yeah. So pick a main. Pick a main that's like, will teach you the fundamentals of the game. Learn it. Learn all the matchups. Dive in. I think the start to becoming a generalist is exactly what you said. If you are having a hard time with a specific matchup, play 20 games as that thing. Take the best. Don't
100%.
try to make the deck. Go grab the best deck list. Grab a winning deck list that won something. Even if it won something a few months ago, you know that it can perform. So if you're 0 and
That's a good
10,
baseline. Yeah.
exactly. If you're 0 and 10 on a list that won an event, you know that it's you. Learn the deck a little bit, but that was huge, dude. For me, it was like I played 10 games on all these heroes that I was having the hardest time with, and my win rate went skyrocketing. Stu,
Yeah.
actually, who I'm gonna see tonight, we're going up to hopefully he's there. But Stu from Denver, who'll dabble in the springs, is like when he took me out of top 8 contention at the RTN locally, and he was on Dorinthia, and after that I was like, man, I need to learn how to play Dorinthia because this is annoying. And Stu is like the nicest, dope. You know, he like Stu is great.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I was like, this motherfucker. Like I was so mad. And he's like the nicest guy.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But like
She's great.
learning to play, and now like my win rate against Dorinthia on Katsu is like very good. It is very good. It helps that we have one of the best Dorinthia players on our team, Christian.
Yeah.
It really
Oh, yeah.
helps. Again,
A
goes
monster.
back to yeah, he is a monster. But for sure. I think you laid like the groundwork, man. I wasn't even expecting to get all that. But if you are struggling finding a main, or you want to make the move to be a player more like Wes and these players that show up to these tournaments and that you see them on different decks all the time and they're still performing, you pretty much laid out. We're 52 minutes in and you laid out the groundwork on like really how to start and how to get there.
Yeah.
Before
Best.
we end, I'm going to ask you the same question I asked Tuck. What are you most excited about in heavy hitters? What are you looking forward to? Or
Sigh, baby.
Kasai? Yeah.
Yeah. So when we were talking about starting the game earlier, that's actually one of the heroes I started on. Is I built Lexi in both Blitz and CC, hated it in Blitz, and then saw the card Valiant Dynamos, and I was like, "This is insane!
Don't
I
tell
get
no.
more block." And then I started, I immediately jumped onto Kasai. Started playing that back in Tails, I guess, era. And I haven't been playing much Blitz, so and she's LL'd now, if I recall correctly. So kind of sad about that since I haven't gotten a chance to play her in like a year or more now since I don't play too much Blitz. But she's CC now, so
Yeah.
hopefully she's good. We'll see when the card pools comes out, but she's seeming like she's got some stonks at least a little bit. We'll see though.
For the people that don't know the boots that Wes just mentioned, if you're a ninja enthusiast like myself, it is the Kadachi Killer. I'm bringing Cyclone Roundhouse back in, and we're kicking the fucking boots right off the map, dude. I'll throw it across the arena. Any shout outs? Any shout outs before we head off?
Yeah, I'll shout out Team Taco. They were one of the first teams here in Colorado Springs when we first started getting the game. They were the ones, them and the Team Advantage and Team Ascent were sort of like the big names that were in the scene when we were getting in. And the initial motivation behind us making our team was, man, we keep getting beat by these guys. How do we beat them? Let's make our own team. Screw these guys. Am I forgetting anybody? Oh, and shout out Big Deck Energy as well. They were another team that was around a lot whenever we were Michael's previous team, actually.
Hell yeah, man.
Yeah, great people.
While you said team advantage, was it card? Is it card advantage? Team advantage? What?
Team Advantage, I think,
Oh,
is
it's
what they
because
call
it's
themselves.
Advantage Games. Because Card Advantage is
Right.
right. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Advantage Games.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, shout out to J&G from Advantage Games for
Oh,
real.
killers.
Dude, those dudes
Yeah.
are killers, but not only are they killers, they are the most like graceful in defeat and in victory I have
Absolutely.
ever seen in any game I've played. It is insane. Like they win and have a smile on their face, and they lose and they have a smile on their face, and they're never salty. I'm sure inside they are like everyone else is, but like, yeah, those two are real ones, man. We're gonna keep shouting out. There's
For
so many
sure.
people from Colorado, which is why I'm always gonna end with like people to shout out. The list is gonna keep going. Shout out to Mac from the local scene for giving me that next podcast idea. Shout out to Blake for giving me this idea, even though we already had it and we recorded it, but it was a good idea, obviously, because we did it. And shout out to everyone that gave us any sort of feedback on the first podcast. I am never going to ask for likes. I'm never going to ask for subscribes. I don't give a fuck about clout. We are not doing this for any other reason than we enjoy doing this. We love to do this. I feel like we have information. I get to tap in and I get to interview dope people, and I'm going to continue to do
Oh, yeah.
that. So selfishly, it's just a lot of fun. But we had tremendous feedback on that first podcast with people that we knew, people that we didn't know. We had more people subscribe to the channel, which again, I don't really care about, but if you're watching it, it makes it so much easier to stay consistent. It makes it so much easier to just get excited to do these now. Like, I can't wait for all the Wu-Tang Wednesdays, man. Like, we got so much love locally and not locally that if you guys see us, we're definitely going to be at LA. If you guys see me or anyone else on the team, run up to us, let us know, say what's up, because the scene is ancestral. There's not too many of us, and we can't be, the card game is so inclusive of everyone and is the greatest community. So like, for real, I might be mean mugging my opponent when I sit across from them with no sleeves on, like, yo, what up? Don't block it. But it's nothing but love, and I really do appreciate all the feedback. Has been insane. The next episode, I believe I'm bringing Tuck back. We're going to talk about is Blitz and Living Legend good for competitive Flesh and Blood? I know you have opinions. I might bring you on.
Be ready for some hot takes from these men.
I think I agree with some of the things he's going to say. So we're actually going to do two parts because I know you and him disagree. So I'm going to do why LL and Blitz is bad for competitive. And then I'm going to have you on. It's going to be why LL and Blitz is good for competitive.
No. Why Dan and Tucker are wrong and stupid.
That's why I got to do two separate ones. If I have the both of you guys on, this is going to be a 3-hour episode, man. But we'll be back with more episodes. If you guys have any topics that you want us to cover, write us in the comments. Let me know. If you want to hear it, that means at least 10 other people want to hear it that won't tell me about it. So keep up with the ideas and stuff. We're going to run out. We're doing this every other week on Wu-Tang Wednesday until we're all dead. So I'm going to need ideas. We're going to need ideas. We got a lot coming down the pipe. Yeah, we're going to bring Dylan on for a meta read. I'm going to have K-Wood on for something. That guy has to get in front of a mic too. That dude is a genius when it comes to Flesh and
His
Blood.
new Azalea build currently is pretty interesting. I think it would be kind of cool because he, speaking of generalist versus specialist, he's like a class specialist. So we were talking about hero specialists, but I would consider K-Wood a class specialist.
That's the
And
topic,
he
dude.
brings some new I don't know, just like every time he brings his ranger decks to anything, I'm always like, "What you on, bro? What you got? What you got over there? What you cooking with?"
Yeah,
he's always got something new and interesting going on.
He's good to pick his brain. Matt McLeod from Ascent said he was going to join. Yeah, we're getting all the killers, and like everyone that I'm going to bring on, and I'm going to bring local people too. I think Flesh and Blood does something for everyone, so I want to bring local people on after they do their first RTN and kind of be like, yo, what was you just did your first RTN. How would you tell someone that is prepping for their first? And we're going to do everything. Bro, this was insane. A ton of value. I'm going to watch it back 17 times because it's going to make me better. I'm still going to come to you for all my questions, though, because...
Hey, that's cool. It's cool.
Yeah. Everybody needs a Wes in their life. Everybody needs a Wes.
We can talk about how good CNC is some more.
Oh yeah, dude. Yeah, I appreciate you, man. Thank you so much. We'll be back in 2 weeks on Wu-Tang Wednesday with the next episode of Protect Your Deck. See you guys.
Peace.